Hello, so in this setting we are going to talk about how to render an image sequence in Maya. So I've already got a scene in here and I've done some test renders with iterative work just to come up with the final result that I wanted. So in this scene we've got a teapot model that I've downloaded from Pixar's website. It's free to use for students and academic to practice, and we've got a studio set up with 3 lights. I've got an area light as a key light. I'm just going to put it back, and then I've got a Macbeth color plate where I could pick the right colors and so on and so forth. So in this scene we've got an animation, just a turntable, 180 frames, and I've got a shot camera that gives me the results that I want. The scene is set to real scale, so the entire set is roughly 300 centimeters tall, which will give me predictable results. So we can find that out through measuring it. I could use this light as my source, as a reference point. 375 centimeters is how tall the light is, and the actual teapot with the stand is roughly 65 centimeters, so that's what it is. But anyway, today's session is about how to render an image sequence, or how to render the animation as a sequence in Maya. So the first thing we need to do, we need to go to the render settings and then start from the beginning. So I'm going to just bring the default settings so that we all start from the same page. What I like to do, I like to call my files, and I don't want to use the file name per se. I can just call this, in my case, I call it ACES workflow, because this is something that I need later on. But you can call it my room or whatever you've got. You can just give a descriptive name. Don't put numbers, just a name. And that means your file name will be like this. So my projects folder is set up properly, so I went to set and set the project folder and open the file and saved it accordingly. Thus I get this pathway, and that's the slug line. Anyway, so I know that once I name this it's going to work properly. It's going to save in this folder. So the image format is EXR. The compression is PXR24. That's what we're going to use. And then I want you to pick the merge AOVs. Don't worry about the technicality of what that means. We'll talk about that later. And the file name animation extension. Right now, as you can see, there is only one single file because it's only single render. But I want to change this to name.number.extension. Hash stands for number. So as soon as I do that, it asks for a frame padding and a frame range. So let's say if I'm rendering the whole 180 frames, that means 1 to 180, and the frame padding is that it's for the compositing software such as After Effects or any other software to actually pick up the entire sequence. Right now our files are going to be called ACES workflow.1. The extension. But if I take this to 3, because the last number in the sequence is 180, we need 3 digits, and that's 3. So that means our files are going to start as 001, 002, and then we'll finish on 180. So frame padding gives us the zeros. Thus the compositing package will pick up the sequence. And then the last thing in this window, actually there are 2 other things to check, is which cameras we're going to render. Now sometimes we forget, we keep the perspective camera, knowing that although we have a render cam, we tend to forget, so make sure the right camera is picked, and I think mine is called render cam. So I'm just going to pick that one. And then image size, well, we are working in HD, so that's going to be HD 1080. That's it, and we can verify that. I've turned on the resolution gate and the film gate just to see what's happening. So the scene is framed nicely, and this is what's going to be rendered. The next thing we're going to do, we are going to go to the system, and you're going to make a choice between CPU and GPU. So in my case, I pick GPU. This is all GPU rendering. Now GPU works well, provided that you've got a good graphic card. My computer is quite old, and I'm on NVIDIA GeForce 1060. I've updated the drivers recently. The other thing I've done, I went to Arnold's website and downloaded the latest Arnold for Maya 2022, and I'm on Arnold 5.211, and that is Arnold's download, and it was this one. Okay, so if you realize that you haven't updated your Arnold, then do it. But the problem with this is that if you're a part of a course and the systems at the university or the college, they have a previous Arnold, and at home you've got a higher version, then it might not be, it's not a good idea. Perhaps stick to the version that you're going to render your images out. So if you're rendering at home, well, update it. Then if you're not, then keep the versions consistent. So in my case, I'm rendering on my computer, so I downloaded the latest version of Arnold. Some people might still have the old 4.5. The reason I've done it, because my computer is old and it required a final update, because previous Arnold was always crashing in GPU. GPU is quite fast. The only downside, and I think they're still improving it, is that I find that it's quite noisy when it comes to rendering glass and so on and so forth. And when you are iteratively testing your renders, I recommend that you click on this cog and you add an optics denoiser, which is this one. That means that as you're rendering it, it will always show you the denoised version, so you can be 100% comfortable and happy with the overall results. And then because I picked GPU, I've got the samples to do with camera. What these samples will do, they will actually reduce the noise, but you can increase them to get a good quality. And I think my settings were 4 for this scene. Okay, and then on the system, I picked GPU, and finally I'm going to click on output denoising AOVs. Because the merge AOVs are ticked, output denoising AOVs have to be ticked as well. Again, don't worry about technicalities, but basically what this is going to do is going to try and render out the denoised versions of your images based on the render quality here. Now if you want to, once you set this up, whilst you're testing your scene, if you realize that you know what, you might just want to turn off the denoiser in this view, because this is just as a preview there. It's there for you to test how it looks at the end. You can actually turn this off and see, try and see the final result by actually increasing these camera AAs. Again, the problem with this is that as you increase these numbers, your render time increases as well, so be careful. Anyway, so we've got that. So these are the settings, you know, in my case. Okay. And the other thing we need to do actually under the Arnold renderer, when I use GPU, it's important to switch to box as the filter type. It's good for illustrative scenes, but also it works well with GPU. With CPU, Gaussian is fine. This one is ticked. We're good to go. The next thing to check is time slider. We're working on 24 frames per second. Let's check our color management. This should be on by default. We are working with this color setup. That's it. Now finally, once you've done all this, it's time to render. So there are two types of options in here. One, you can do batch rendering and still keep Maya on. I'm just going to save this. But to be able to do batch rendering, in other words, you have Maya on, something is rendering behind the scenes, it's cool, you know, you can work depending on the power of your computer, obviously. To do batch rendering and to avoid any watermarks on your renders, you need to go to Arnold, Licensing, License Manager. This is where, if you're a student, you have already got access to Autodesk ID, so you will use the same ID to sign in, and you will have feedback about the length of the time left on your license. This is to do with Arnold. The other advantage of this, obviously, you can do when you need a render farm, you can do batch rendering through that, and so on and so forth. But also, say you've closed Maya, you save the file, set the project folder properly, you close Maya, you can actually go to your file and hold on to the right mouse button and simply go to render. So whilst Maya is closed, you can actually render it, and behind the scenes it's going to do a command line rendering. So that's the benefit of batch rendering. If you realize that you can't remember your license, and you also want to actually specify a folder where you can render out or save the rendered images, a folder maybe outside of the project file, you can actually go render sequence option box. You're asked the same question, so in this case it's render camera, so render cam, and it says, okay, where do you want to save the output, the rendering? So you can actually specify a folder. Now by default it goes to the images. If you want to keep everything in the same place, obviously that's cool, but if you want to have a separate folder somewhere called rendered images and so on and so forth, you can actually pick that folder and it will actually save it to that, and then you can click on render sequence. The problem with this one, obviously, Maya has to be on, and it doesn't give you much option of doing something else. Yeah, so this is another option. That's it really. Then because I've already rendered this, I'm just going to actually test this. So if I go to render, batch render, what it will do, it will start giving you feedback in here. So it's going to crunch some numbers, do some stuff with it, and then it will give you a percentage indication where it goes through every frame. You will have a rough idea of how long it takes to render one frame. We normally get that in here anyway when we actually do test renders. We normally get that information somewhere around here. Right now these are already saved snapshots, so I don't see much in here, but you actually get a rough idea. Anyway, now it's rendering. So I'm on 5% rendering frame 1, and my file is called acesworkflow.001 to start with. That's the first image, and it's rendering in the images folder. Okay, I'm going to cancel this anyway. I'm going to cancel the batch render, and I'm going to show you where they are. So as you can see, I've already been doing a lot of stuff to make sure that I can simplify this process. So mine is saved somewhere. I've actually created a folder for it. Here we go. So I've rendered 24 frames, and these are my renders from 1 to 24 with a frame padding of 3. That's it really, and it is this sequence that we're going to take to After Effects, and then we're going to work with it and export it and make the video ready for presentation. Thank you for watching.